They figured it was just another collapsed barn. That's how Deputy Brooks put it when they rolled up to the Miller place out past the edge of Oakage, Georgia. Just sun-scorched timber and rusted tin curling under the July heat. But Atlas had other plans. Officer Ethan Mitchell's canine partner froze just shy of the warped doors. The German Shepherd let out a bark that shook through the empty fields like a rifle crack. One blue eye, one brown, both locked on the floorboards like they were hiding. Sin, you didn't brush off a bark like that. Not from Atlas. Not when it sounded less like a warning and more like a cry. At first, no one paid it much mind. The place had been forgotten for years. Grass strangled the porch steps, the fences sagged like drunk men, and the only prints in the dirt belonged to stray dogs and high school kids out for trouble. But Atlas wouldn't budge. His body rigid, ears pinned, chest heaving like a steam engine. Ethan recognized that posture. It wasn't about protocol. It was about instinct. Something was under there, breathing, hidden, waiting. Waiting Oakage was one of those towns where everyone waved at stop signs, but no one talked past Sunday service. Secrets bloomed in the quiet fed by heat, pride, and silence. The sun beat down, with that southern vengeance, turning roads to griddles and moods to kindling. Main Street shimmered behind rising waves of haze. Officer Ethan Mitchell adjusted Atlas's tactical vest with practiced fingers, sweat stinging his eyes. At 38, grief had left lines on his face deeper than age ever could. 3 years back, he'd lost his wife Sarah and their little girl Emma to a drunk driver who thought speed limits were suggestions. Some mornings, the ache still pressed against his ribs like a cinder block. Atlas had pulled him from that abyss. The dog had been a rescue to abandon behind a repo. House ribs, like piano keys, one ear slashed from some forgotten fight. The two of them healed in silence, the kind of silence that understands pain without needing words. "Ready, bud?" Ethan asked softly, brushing his hand over the dog's black and tan fur. Atlas leaned in close. No bark, just trust. Sheriff Frank Donovan ran the Oakage department with the calm of a man who'd buried more friends than enemies. 60 years old, steel hair, steel mind. He didn't doubt Ethan, not even once. Mitchell's got a gut like radar, he'd tell the rookies, especially Brooks, who at 26 still thought experience came with a badge and not with loss. Then there was Dr. Melissa Carter, the only trauma pediatrician for miles. Tough as nails, gentle as rainfall. Her clinic walls were covered in crayon masterpieces, bright chaos on sterile white. She'd worked with Ethan before, in cases where the victims were too small to speak. Her presence always meant things were serious. None of them, not the sheriff, not the doctor, not even Atlas, could have guessed what would unravel from one bark at the Miller place, or how it would gut their town from the inside out. The call came at 3:17 on a Tuesday. Weird sounds near the old Miller Ranch, 8 miles past the county line, usually meant coyotes or thrill-seekers looking to film ghost videos. Ethan had been neck-deep in paperwork when dispatch called it in. He volunteered before they even finished the sentence. Any excuse to get out of the stuffy station and let Atlas stretch his legs, taking your mutt on another stroll. Brooks had smirked as Ethan slung his vest on. "Dogs need exercise," Ethan replied flatly. He didn't bother explaining. Atlas wasn't just a pet. He was the department's secret weapon. Found 3 hikers when others gave up, dug up a murder weapon buried a foot deep in another case. But to some, he was still just a dog. Once, the Miller Ranch had been something a proud horse farm until Old Man Miller strode out and his kids sold it piece by piece. Now it was just sagging wood and memories. The house was boarded, the training ring swallowed by weeds. The barn leaned like it had given up. Heat rippled across the golden fields. Ethan parked beneath the one tree that hadn't tapped out yet. As soon as Atlas hit the ground, his demeanor shifted. The air changed. He crouched low, ears scanning, nostrils flaring like a bloodhound tasting ghosts. "What is it, boy?" Ethan whispered, unclipping his leash. Atlas moved fast, straight for the barn. Not frantic, but sure. For 20 minutes, Ethan did a textbook sweep. Main house, sealed. No signs of entry. Storage sheds, empty except for rodent filth. He was ready to call it when Atlas gave a bark that didn't belong in any training manual. Not an alert, not a warning, a plea. The shepherd stood at the barns. Mouth like a statue of judgment, Ethan's gut twisted. He keyed the radio. Mitchell to dispatch. K9 is alerting something's under the barn. Send backup. Copy that. The voice crackled. Brooks en route. ETA 15. The barn was a cathedral of shadows. Shafts of light sliced through broken boards, dust swirling like spirits caught in limbo. The scent hit Ethan hard, a mix of mold, old hay, and something else. Something foul. Atlas prowled to the far corner. One set of planks stood out, not as old, not as worn. That's where he started digging, frantic, focused. Wood chips flew as he clawed with precision. By the time Brooks showed up, Ethan was already on his knees with a crowbar, prying at a seam in the floor. This, for real? Brooks scoffed, arms crossed. "Aren't you wasting my time on some damn raccoon nest?" Ethan didn't even glance up. Atlas doesn't bark for rats. "It's probably just a root cellar," Brooks muttered. "All these old barns have empty wood, groaned like it hadn't been touched in decades." But Atlas had known. He always did. Instead of finding a cellar, they uncovered a narrow shaft, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, with jagged ladder rungs jammed into packed dirt. Then came a sound faint, muffled, a whimper. It rose from the dark like a ghost. Brooks paled, Sweet Mary. Ethan was already snapping open his flashlight. "Call it in. I need backup, ambulance on standby. And get Sheriff Donovan." Now, what they discovered below turned Ethan's stomach. A crude room, no bigger than a tool shed, held up by broken pallets and scrap wood, for kids. 3 curled on a filthy mattress. 1 lay still in the shadows. Their clothes were rags, faces caked in grime, eyes locked on the intruders like they'd seen angels or monsters. The oldest, maybe 10, slid in front of the others, shielding them with her arms. A boy with straw-colored hair and hollow cheeks didn't flinch. His stare locked, not on the men but on Atlas, the dog, who had somehow made it down beside Ethan. "It's all right," Ethan said gently, hands lowered. "We're cops. We came to help." But the boy, he never looked at Ethan. He reached for the dog, hand trembling. "You heard us," he whispered, voice scratchy like dry leaves. "You actually heard us." The next 2 days blurred into cohasarins, stretchers, forms that couldn't possibly describe what they'd seen. Oak Ridge Memorial, a small-town hospital used to handling broken arms and birthing babies, turned into a flashpoint. Reporters gathered like crows outside. Ethan stood near the pediatric wing, untouched coffee cooling in his grip, watching the frenzy unfold below. Miracle at Miller Barn, the headline screamed, "K9 uncovers child dungeon." Sheriff. Donovan tried to hold the press back, but the air was thick with hunger for answers, for outrage. "They're lucky to be alive," said Dr. Carter, appearing beside him. Her eyes, dark-ringed from no sleep, were full of disbelief. "That little one Caleb, he's septic, deep cuts, dehydration." Honestly, another day. She stopped, didn't need to finish. Ethan rubbed his jaw. Any of them talking. Sophie, the oldest, gave us names, said they'd been trapped for weeks. A man came now and then with food. Then he just stopped. She pinched the bridge of her nose. "They're badly traumatized. This won't be a fast recovery." Bits and pieces emerged. Sophie Anderson, 10 missing from Clayton County. Max Rivera, 6 vanished from a playground in Athens. Lily Taylor, 7 last seen outside a church in Monroe. And Caleb, no last name, no file. No one had ever reported him missing, as if he didn't exist. Donovan called for an emergency meeting. New leads were coming fast. A fatal crash 2 weeks prior pickup rolled off Highway 16. The driver, Jackson Reed, 42, lived alone, worked construction. No priors. Neighbors described him as quiet. "Just like they always do," muttered Brooks. "Always quiet until they're not." Donovan nodded grimly. Tire treads matched those near the barn. So, 1 dead suspect, 4 traumatized kids. Question now, was he acting alone? Ethan said nothing, but his mind kept circling back to Caleb. The way that boy stared at Atlas like he'd known the dog was coming all along. After the briefing, Ethan approached the sheriff. "I want to bring Atlas to see the kids." Caleb, he connected with him. Might be a way in. Donovan, gruff but seasoned, considered it. "Run it past Dr. Carter. Last thing we need is to scare M worse." Dr. Carter didn't just approve, she encouraged it. Kids like this, especially the deeply traumatized, they often trust animals before they trust people, she said, walking Ethan and Atlas to a quiet playroom. Atlas, for his part, seemed to grasp the weight of it. Normally full of energy, he moved with a calm, steady gait. Not timid, but soft. The door opened. The kids looked up. Caleb, sitting by the window, turned slowly like he'd sensed something before anyone spoke. What happened next would become legend. Caleb stood unsteady, bones thin. Atlas didn't hesitate. He went to him, sat down, eyes level with the boys. Caleb reached out, brushed a scar on the shepherd's ear. "He heard us," Caleb said. Loud, clear. Everyone froze. That moment cracked something open. Over the next week, Caleb began to speak, though rarely, and only when Atlas was near. He whispered into the dog's ear, like confessing to a priest. Slowly, Ethan and Dr. Carter started piecing his puzzle together. Meanwhile, the story exploded nationwide. State agents poured in. The FBI formed a task force. The Miller property became a 24/7 crime scene, and new fears took root. Were there more places like this? Were other children still waiting underground? Social workers scrambled. Sophie's parents drove in and broke down when they saw her. Max's dad came alone. His wife had collapsed months ago from grief. Lily's grandparents arrived from Tennessee, teary but whole. But Caleb, no one came. No parent, no uncle. No friend. DNA samples yielded nothing. He was a blank line in every database, a child without a paper trail. "What's going to happen to him?" Ethan asked Patricia Wilson, the exhausted social worker now assigned to Caleb. She sighed.
"If
he stabilizes physically, foster care." But her voice trailed off. They both knew the odds. Children like Caleb, no past, no family, deep trauma they fell through cracks no one even saw. That night, Ethan sat awake in his quiet house. No Sarah humming in the kitchen. No Emma with her backpack full of questions. Just silence. And a boy no one claimed, and a dog that had heard a voice the world ignored. Atlas lay curled at the foot of the bed, head resting between his front paws, eyes tracking Ethan as he paced the room. "That kid's got no one." "Atlas, Ethan," said quietly, and the dog's ears flicked toward him. No family looking. No one's even reported him missing. The injustice of it burned in his chest like bad whiskey. The decision didn't come in a flash, more like a storm cloud gathering slow, heavy, then sudden. By sunrise, Ethan walked straight into Sheriff Donovan's office. "I want to apply for emergency foster placement for Caleb," he said, no hesitation. Donovan raised an eyebrow. "You serious, Mitchell? Your lead on this case." "That's a conflict big as Texas." I'll step back. "Let Brooks handle forensics. That's not the issue, and you know it." Donovan leaned forward, voice sharp. "You live alone. You've got a dangerous job. This isn't a puppy you're adopting." "Not alone," Ethan said, nodding at Atlas in his mind. "And I've got space. More importantly, Caleb connects with Atlas. That's more than you'll get from any stranger." Donovan sighed. "The department wants you on the task force. They're linking this to multi-state activity. They need your mind and your mutt's nose." "They'll have to wait," Ethan replied, voice steady, eyes clear. "That boy needs us more right now." Donovan didn't answer right away. The silence pressed in tight. Finally, he exhaled hard. "File with Patricia. Expect home checks, paperwork, the whole works." "I've survived worse," Ethan said. Donovan looked him over, his expression softening. "Just make sure you're doing the right thing for both of you." And as Ethan left, he wasn't sure he was. But that afternoon at the hospital, when Atlas trotted in and Caleb visibly relaxed for the first time since they'd found him, Ethan knew he couldn't walk away, not this time, not from this boy who had seen things no kid ever should, and come out the other side with no one waiting. The spare bedroom had sat untouched for 3 years, sealed off since Sarah and Emma died. A shrine to grief Ethan hadn't dared disturb until now. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, taking in the dusty dresser, the faded walls, the cold, bare mattress. "Not exactly Better Homes and Gardens," he muttered. Atlas sat beside him, ears up, eyes locked on the space like he, too, was sizing up the task ahead. Patricia Wilson had taken the request better than expected. After her surprise, Wore off, she'd offered cautious support. Temporary emergency, foster only, she'd warned, flipping through the forms. Unusual case. But the child clearly trusts your canine. She passed him the stack of documents, her tone softening. Honestly, Mitchell, I think you're doing the right thing. Right now, that kid needs safety more than perfection. The next 48 hours were a blur. Ethan called in his neighbor, Martha Wilson, no relation to Patricia, retired teacher with a firm hand and a soft heart. Ethan Mitchell, she declared upon seeing the room, you expect a child to sleep in this museum of sorrow. At 78, she'd outlived 2 husbands, raised 4 kids, and held more wisdom than most textbooks. Take those curtains down. I'll handle the rest. By the time Dr. V. Carter gave the green light for discharge, the room looked nothing like before. The walls were now soft green, soothing, Martha had insisted. A second-hand bookshelf held worn but loved children's books. New curtains fluttered at the open window. The bed, made with a hand-stitched quilt covered in cheerful dog prints, looked like a promise. My Henry would have approved, Martha said, touching the doorframe. He always said, every child needs a place to land. She turned. To Ethan, you've done a good thing. My Henry would have liked you. The morning they brought Caleb home, the July heat gave them a break-cool breeze. Overcast skies, Caleb sat stiff in the back of Ethan's old Ford truck, a worn-out backpack. In his lap, inside were 2 changes of donated clothes, a toothbrush and a plush bear, with a faded ribbon from the children's wing. Atlas lay curled beside him, occasionally bumping Caleb's elbow with his nose, whenever the boy's breath turned shaky, or his fingers clenched too tight. Each time, Caleb seemed to ground himself, loosening his grip, gaze still fixed on the world passing outside. Home sweet home, Ethan said lightly, as he turned into the gravel drive. His heart thumped too fast. What the hell did he know about raising a traumatized child? The crash course orientation with social services was a blur. The parenting handbooks from Patricia were still in their shrink wrap. Caleb followed Ethan, and Atlas inside, like someone stepping into enemy territory. Cautious, silent, he lingered in the living room, eyeing the cracked leather couch, the framed photo of Sarah and Emma still on the shelf, the cluttered bookcase. You want to see your room? Ethan asked after a long silence. The boy nodded faintly. It was the first time Ethan saw real emotion from him, outside of how he acted with Atlas. His eyes widened at the dog-themed quilt, the tiny desk near the window, the soft glow of the paw-shaped nightlight. This is for me, he whispered. All yours, Ethan said. Mrs. Wilson helped. There's cookies in the kitchen, too. Caleb placed his backpack on the bed with care, then ran his fingers over the quilt, pausing at a German Shepherd patch that looked uncannily like Atlas. You can change anything colors. Bedspread, it's perfect, Caleb said, still staring at the dog. Then, so quiet Ethan nearly missed it. Thank you. Those early days were fragile. Caleb slept with his bedroom door cracked and the paw light glowing Atlas, without being told. Moved from Ethan's room to the floor by Caleb's bed, his head resting close to the boy's hand each night. The nightmares came like clockwork, Caleb crying out in the dark. Thrashing and each time Ethan would rush in, only to find Atlas already there, calm and unmoving, grounding the child with his presence. Ethan learned to knock first, to speak gently, to move slow. He learned Caleb hated spicy food, wouldn't eat anything he couldn't identify by texture, and that he needed the bathroom door slightly open to feel safe. On the 4th night, after washing up the plates from their simple grilled cheese and apples dinner, Ethan was caught off guard when Caleb finally spoke in his own. Atlas saved us when no one else could hear. The boy's voice was soft, but every word landed heavy. Ethan paused, drying his hands slowly on the dish towel, trying to settle the storm rising in his chest. Caleb sat on the floor, legs folded under him, Atlas's broad head resting quietly in his lap as those small hands tangled themselves gently in the German Shepherd's thick fur. He's good at that, Ethan said carefully, easing into the armchair nearby, not too close. He listens better than people. Caleb didn't look up. We yelled when we heard voices. We screamed. But the bad man said, if we made too much noise, we'd disappear forever. His tone was eerily flat, like reading from a manual. Sophie tried once. He took her away for a whole day. When she came back, she couldn't talk no more. Ethan forced his breath to stay calm, even while everything inside him screamed. "You were brave," he said, meaning every syllable. "All of you." Caleb lifted one shoulder in a small shrug that looked far too grown up. "We just wanted to go home." Then he looked straight at Ethan. "But I don't have a home, do I?" "That's what the clipboard lady said." Ethan felt the words slam into his chest. "You do now," he said softly. "With me, with Atlas, for as long as you want." Caleb stared for a second, then nodded, solemn and slow, returning his attention. To the dog, the moment was over, but something had shifted. Just a crack in the wall, enough for a little light to slip through. Back at the station, the investigation was moving faster than anyone had expected. Ethan split his time half at the department, coordinating K-9 teams across properties tied to Reed, and half at home. Learning the fragile rhythm of caring for a boy who'd seen too much, Martha Wilson dropped by daily, bringing casseroles and advice, and Patricia made regular check-ins. 2 weeks in, Ethan found something strange in Caleb's drawing notebook. A circle, over and over, each one with a vertical line cutting through, a wide-open eye. Curious, Ethan asked him about it while they were feeding Atlas. Caleb barely blinked. It was on the bad man's arm and the quiet man's papers. The quiet man, mentioned only a handful of times, was apparently someone who brought supplies, food, another adult, another piece of the puzzle, and it fit. The lab had pulled fingerprints from the underground site prints that didn't belong. To Reed, multiple tire treads. To Ethan brought the symbol to Sheriff Donovan, who didn't waste time forwarding it to the feds. 2 days later, Special Agent Diana Reeves showed up in Oakage, stone-faced, carrying a folder. "The symbol your foster son drew," she said without greeting, laying down several case photos. "We've seen it before. 3 human trafficking rings. Southeast region." The last 10 years, Ethan felt the floor tilt under him. Suddenly it all fit how the kids were chosen. The chamber hidden underground, Caleb's lack of any digital footprint. Reeves wasn't finished. "There's reason to believe someone local is involved. Someone high up. This kind of operation needs funding, property access, and cover." "You're telling me someone in Oakage is running this?" Donovan looked stunned, not just involved, Reeves said coldly, coordinating. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Give me names." Reeves didn't flinch. "We're not ready to make arrests yet, but we're closing in. These people," her eyes flicked toward Caleb's name on a file, "have the power to erase children from existence. That's why we need to move smart." Ethan drove home with those words echoing in his skull. That night, he added locks to every door and window. He installed cameras, moved Atlas's bed to the hallway, though the dog preferred sleeping at Caleb's bedside anyway. The next day, forensic analysis came back. The second set of prints, William Chambers. William Chambers, heir to one of Oakage's oldest families. The Chambers family owned half the town, funded parks, schools, even donated ambulances. William was on the city council. His company had built the new elementary wing. "This has to be wrong," Donovan said, staring at the lab results. "William's not just some guy, he's Oakage." "So was Reed," Ethan shot back. "Reed? Worked jobs for Chambers Construction, had access to remote build sites. It all lines up. Connections, resources, cover." Donovan's face darkened. "Tread careful, Mitchell. If you're wrong, I'm not." But it didn't matter. Word spread. And Oakage started to fracture. Some residents embraced the truth-held fundraisers, brought casseroles over the rescued children. Others resented the spotlight, questioned the outside agencies, the accusations. At the next town hall, the divide cracked wide open. Ethan left Caleb with Martha and drove in under Donovan's orders. He sat in the back, listening as the crowd bickered. "This whole mess is killing tourism," barked Gerald Thompson. "The hardware guy? We're getting cancellations at the Lake Lodge by the dozens. For kids, we're locked in a bunker," snapped Dr. Carter, arms crossed. "One doesn't even have a name. That seems a little more important than boat rentals." "I'm not saying it's nothing," Thompson backpedaled, "but you're destroying a man's reputation over maybe some fingerprints. The guy volunteers for children's hospitals every year." The back and forth kept climbing. Ethan stayed, silent, until a familiar, polished voice rose near the front. William Chambers, upright, poised, dressed like he'd just come from a law firm, not a community meeting. He didn't need a microphone. "My friends," he said, hands raised in quiet command. "What happened to those children is a tragedy, an outrage, and the one responsible deserves whatever hell waits for him." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, but Ethan watched carefully. Chambers didn't say he wasn't involved, not once. The crowd stirred, but Chambers kept speaking. "We can't let our anger lead us into the same kind of injustice we're condemning," he said, voice steady. "I've worked closely with the investigation. Every file tied to Jackson Reed's employment has been turned over, and yet my family's name is being dragged through the mud. Our integrity questioned." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "Oak Ridge is better than that. We've always stood shoulder to shoulder in dark times. The delivery was flawless." By the time he finished, Chambers had promised a generous donation to fund a child safety initiative in local schools. And just like that, the mood in the room shifted. As people trickled out, Martha Wilson approached Ethan. Her lined face was resolute. "Don't listen to a word from those bootlickers," she said loud enough for several folks to hear. I've been around since dirt, and I can spot a snake in a Sunday suit from a mile away." Ethan chuckled, despite himself. "You should probably get home to Caleb, Mrs. Wilson." "He's good," she replied, her tone softening. "My grandson Tommy's over. They're building the fort in the living room. Atlas is guarding the doorway like it's Fort Knox. That boy, he's starting to come back to life," she added. "Yesterday, he asked for seconds at lunch." Small things, but they mattered. Those little wins kept Ethan grounded as the days grew heavier. Caleb began sketching again, simple drawings, clumsy lines, but always of Atlas. Sometimes the dog was flying. Sometimes he was carrying children away from danger. Caleb even ventured outside now, tossing tennis balls to Atlas bit by bit, reclaiming a world he'd retreated from. Then one evening, something happened that nearly made Ethan drop the dish in his hand. Laughter, clear, childlike laughter from the backyard Caleb's, bubbling out as Atlas slathered his face with slobbery kisses, but the shadows still crept in. Most nights Caleb awoke, shrieking, lost in nightmares. He still wouldn't go into small spaces or anywhere without windows. Sometimes he'd just freeze, like his soul had left the room, eyes wide, body tense, trapped in something Ethan could barely imagine. About 3 weeks after Caleb moved in, Ethan found the boy in the kitchen before sunrise, whispering to Atlas in urgent tones. "I saw him," Caleb said, "the quiet man. He was watching the house yesterday, when you were gone, and Mrs. Martha took out the trash." Ethan stepped into the kitchen, deliberately making enough noise not to startle the boy. "Who'd you see, buddy?" Caleb's eyes flew up to meet his wide and haunted. For a moment, Ethan feared he'd go silent again, but Atlas nudged the boy's hand gently, grounding him. "The guy who brought food sometimes," Caleb murmured, "not the bad one, the other guy. He had those papers, the ones with the I symbol." Ethan's heart dropped. "Can you tell me what he looked like?" he asked, keeping his voice level. "He was tall, brown hair, had a star on his belt." "Like a badge?" Ethan asked. Caleb nodded slowly, then frowned. "Not like yours. His clothes were different, but he had a star and a gun." Ethan's stomach turned. A deputy, someone with access to records, someone who knew where Caleb was staying, and someone close to Chambers. Later that day, Ethan installed discrete cameras around the outside of the house. Not department issue, these were store-bought, paid for in cash, at a strip mall 2 towns over. He started taking alternate routes home, watching for any cars that lingered too long. Atlas never left Caleb's side. Ethan even put in a formal request for canine leave so the dog could remain home. His instincts paid off. 3 nights later, the front camera caught a clear image of Deputy James Parker, a trusted officer with 7 years on the force, driving past Ethan's house at 11:30 p.m. Well, after his shift had ended, disturbed, Ethan combed through footage from the past week. He found 4 more sightings. In one, Parker's car was parked at the end of the block and gen off for almost an hour. Ethan weighed his next move with care. Parker had access to department systems, files, case updates. If he was in on this, going to Sheriff Donovan directly could backfire. The sheriff trusted his guys. They'd been together for years, but sitting on this information risked everything, especially Caleb's safety. After a sleepless night, Ethan made his choice. He backed up all the footage onto a secure thumb drive and drove not to the station, but to Dr. Carter's office. "I need a favor," he said once they were alone, "and it might put you in a tough spot." He laid out everything Parker, the surveillance, the boy's account. When he was done, he looked her in the eye. "I need a place for Caleb. Just for a few days, somewhere Parker wouldn't even think to look." Dr. Carter didn't hesitate. "My sister's got a cabin about 40 miles north," she said. "Nobody in the department knows it exists. I'll take a few days off. Say I'm at a seminar." She raised a hand before Ethan could thank her. "Save it. Those kids, those were my patients. What happened to them happened here, in my town. I won't stand by and let it happen again." When Ethan got home to pack, something was off. Atlas stood rigid by the front door, growling low and steady. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. In 4 years, the dog had never acted like this without reason. "What's wrong, boy?" Ethan whispered, drawing his sidearm. "Where's Caleb?" Atlas turned and padded quickly toward the back room. There, Caleb sat on his bed, staring. "Out the window? He came back," the boy whispered, the quiet man. "He was taking pictures." The next 48 hours unraveled like a covert operation, every move calculated, every decision weighed. Ethan drove Caleb to the cabin under the cover of night, swapping cars multiple times. Might have looked paranoid to an outsider, but the threats were real. The cabin was perfect hidden in pine forest, reachable only by one visible road, the rear protected by a sheer slope, a fortress in the woods. "I've got to go back," Ethan told Caleb as the boy sat curled on the dusty couch. Atlas pressed. Tight beside him, "Dr. Carter will stay here with you. I have to take what we found to people who can really help." "The people with stars?" Caleb asked, voice flat. "Like the quiet man?" Ethan crouched, locking eyes with him. "No, these are different stars. These are the ones who catch the bad guys, even the ones who pretend to be good." Caleb didn't respond at first. He looked at Atlas, burying his hands in the shepherd's thick fur. Then he spoke, voice barely audible. "Will Atlas stay?" The question stopped Ethan cold. Atlas was his partner. Standard protocol said, take the dog, especially if there might be danger ahead. But looking at Caleb's pale skin, the tremble in his lip, the way he clung to that dog like a lifeline, Ethan didn't need protocol. He needed heart. "Yeah," Ethan said, hand resting on the dog's head. "Atlas is staying. He'll watch over you. Nothing's getting past him." The wave of relief that passed over Caleb's face made it clear he finally felt safe. Atlas seemed to sense it. He moved in closer to the boy, posture stiff. Those mismatched eyes locked on the doorway like a soldier on post. "I left some emergency supplies in the pantry," Dr. Carter whispered to Ethan as she walked him to his truck. "It should hold for a few days. My sister's place is off-grid, no cell service, but there's a land I've already programmed your number and the FBI task force line on speed dial." Ethan gave a slow nod. "If I haven't called or come back by tomorrow night," he said, "take him and head north. Don't stop until you hit the FBI field office in Atlanta. Ask for Agent Reeves, by name." Dr. Carter's expression tightened. "Be careful. William Chambers didn't get where he is by being sloppy. If he's behind this, he's been covering tracks for decades." Ethan's jaw clenched. Then, it's time someone finally called him out. The road back to Oak Ridge gave Ethan space to think. The evidence they'd built was damning, but not enough. Parker's sketchy movements, Caleb's ID of a soft-spoken man with a badge, the partial prints at the cabin, Reed's suspicious past with Chambers' construction it painted a rotten picture. But still, not enough for a warrant, not against someone with Chambers' reach. What they needed was a direct link. Paperwork, money trails, private calls, something tying Chambers straight to the trafficking ring. Ethan had a sit-down scheduled, with Agent Reeves in the morning, but a knot twisted in his gut. If Parker had been surveilling the house, then Caleb's disappearance wouldn't have gone unnoticed. Instead of heading home, Ethan turned the wheel toward the sheriff's office. The place was quiet just to deputies, working phones, and a booking clerk dealing with a loud drunk. No sign of Parker, which was either good or real bad. Sheriff Donovan's office was dark, but Ethan knew the man rarely clocked out on time. He rapped on the door, bracing himself. "Come in," came the familiar gravelly voice. Ethan stepped in. Donovan sat behind his desk, reading glasses perched low, drowning in reports. He didn't even look surprised. "Mitchell knew you'd turn up sooner or later." Ethan shut the door behind him. "We need to talk about Deputy Parker." Donovan sighed, tugging off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Take a seat, son." For the next 20 minutes, Ethan laid it all out. The surveillance, Caleb's description, Parker's weird patrols. Donovan didn't interrupt, didn't even blink. When Ethan finally finished, Donovan spoke slowly. "That's a heavy accusation, against one of my own." "It's not a theory," Ethan said, firm. "It's evidence, and that's only the start. Parker ties to Chambers. Chambers ties to Reed. They're moving people right under our noses." Donovan didn't answer. "Right away then, quietly, where's the boy?" Ethan hesitated, alarms flashing in his head. "Safe, far from here." Donovan gave a small nod. "Good, because Parker's been watching your house." "On my orders," the words hit like a gut punch. "Your orders. I've been working this case for months. Had to play it close, didn't know who I could trust." Donovan reached into a drawer and pulled out a file thick enough to choke a horse. "Chambers has been on my radar long before those kids turned up. His company crosses state lines. Perfect setup for smuggling operations." Ethan's voice went hard. "You knew, while those children were still buried underground." Donovan didn't flinch. "I knew something smelled off, just didn't have proof until your dog sniffed out that bunker." He slid the file forward. "Parker isn't crooked. He's deep cover. Feeding Chambers bad info, building trust. We're on the verge of blowing this thing wide open." Ethan flipped through the file photos, bank records, travel logs, tying Chambers to criminal outfits across 3 states. All gathered before Caleb was even found. "Why not loop me in?" Ethan asked. "Because you're too close now," Donovan said, steady. "You took in one of the kids. Chambers is using that to make you look obsessed. He's telling people you're chasing ghosts because of your own loss." It was a vile move, weaponizing Ethan's grief to strip his credibility. "Agent Reeves," Ethan asked, "still on board?" "But we're speeding things up. Parker caught wind Chambers' plans to disappear in the next 48 hours. Private jet, hidden accounts, everything's in motion." Ethan felt it then, the whole puzzle sliding into place. "What do you need from me?" Initially, Caleb's testimony would have tied Chambers to the Miller compound. But now that the boys vanished, Donovan's expression darkened. "Chambers is spooked. He's moving sloppy. Tonight's the Kihis, meeting his crew at the hunting lodge outside town. Parkour'll be wired. We're going in." Ethan's instincts roared. "I'm coming with." Donovan shook his head. "Too risky. Parker's cover is tight. You show up, the whole thing implodes." His eyes didn't waver. "Besides, if things go south, who protects the boy?" Then it was a bitter pill. Ethan wanted action, but Donovan was right. Caleb came first. "Call me the second Chambers is in cuffs." "You'll be my first call," Donovan promised. "Now get home, rest up, tomorrow's going to be heavy." Driving back felt ... wrong. Like the tension should have broken, but instead it clung tighter. The knowledge that Donovan had been working behind the scenes should have brought peace. It didn't. Something still itched at Ethan's gut, something missing. At the house, everything felt hollow without Caleb and Atlas. He walked the rooms, checking locks, habits too ingrained to break. In Caleb's room, the comforter was a mess. He straightened it, picked up a crumpled drawing off the floor, a stick figure sketch of Atlas standing guard beside a tiny boy. His throat tightened. At 2:17 a.m., his phone rang. Donovan's name? Lit the screen. Ethan snapped awake. "It's happening," Donovan said. Chambers moved the meeting up. Parker just hit the emergency signal. Ethan was already dressing. "Where?" "The hunting lodge. Right where we thought. FBI tactical teams and Route 15 out. Locals are rolling now." "I'm coming in," Ethan said. "No room for debate." A pause. "Meet me at the station in 10. We roll together." The so-called Chambers Hunting Lodge was no rustic getaway. It was a fortified estate buried deep in private woods about 20 miles from Oak Ridge. The main house loomed timber and stone, more fortress than cabin, perched with a view that surveyed the hills like a king watching his kingdom. The woods around the old estate lit up like a crime, seen on fire spotlights piercing the tree. canopy, a swarm of vehicles crowding the circular driveway. It moved like a military op. Tactical teams from the FBI fanned out, silent but swift, while local deputies set up hard roadblocks along the gravel lanes that fed into the property. Ethan stood beside Sheriff Donovan in the mobile command unit, tension etched in every muscle. Their thermal feed displayed 12 distinct heat signatures inside the building. One of them, presumed to be Parker, glowed brighter. He was wired with a transmitter. All units staged, came the low voice of the team leader overcomes. Awaiting your go, Donovan looked at Agent Reeves, who gave a single nod, jaw tight. Go! What followed felt like a bomb went off, glass shattered, boots stormed. In shouted orders clashed with panicked screams. Suspect fleeing northeast exit. Someone shouted. Ethan tracked the thermal alone figure, tearing through the trees faster than expected. For a man Chambers' age, 2 agents gave chase. Got him, came the update seconds later. Chambers in custody. One by one, confirmation reports rolled in. 12 people arrested. Among them, 3 high-ranking officials, a circuit court judge, and William Chambers. Parker had played his part right up to the takedown, maintaining deep cover. We've got records, Agent Reeves said, her voice tight, almost shaking. Ledgers, photos, full-on digital archives. This goes way beyond for kids. They've been doing this for over 10 years. Her face had gone pale. Dozens of children. The evidence recovered from Chambers' office was a gut puncha, meticulous account of trafficking operations across 5 states. Their victims weren't just lost kids, they were the kind of children society forgot. Those bounced between foster placements, those like Caleb, whose vanishings barely made a ripple. That's not all, Donovan said, coming in from the forensic van. They found DNA reports in a hidden safe. Caleb, he's Alina Summers' son. The name hit like a thunderclap. She'd been a legal assistant at the firm that repped Chambers' holdings. Disappeared 3 years back, allegedly took a job overseas. Case was shelved after emails and postcards trickled in, supposedly from her. She found out, Donovan said grimly. She tried building a case. They took her boy to shut her up, and when she wouldn't quit, his voice trailed. They made sure she disappeared. So Caleb's alone? Ethan asked quietly. Donovan nodded. No listed father. Her folks are gone. No siblings, no next of kin. Ethan pictured the boy at the safe house, the fear in his eyes, the weight he didn't even understand. He's got Atlas, Ethan finally said, and he's got me. By the time sunlight crept into Oak Ridge, the news had already gone national. Ethan stood by the command truck, sky bleeding from black to pale gold. His phone lit up. Dr. Carter's voice came through before he could speak. We're okay, she said. Caleb keeps asking for you. Atlas hasn't left his side. Tell them I'm coming, Ethan said, exhaling the first full breath in days. Tell them it's done. But as the words left his mouth, shouts erupted near one of the cruisers. An engine gunned. Ethan spun around to see a blacked-out SUV tearing down the access road. Deputy Parker was at the wheel. He wasn't arrested. Someone screamed. He's Chambers' man. Ethan's stomach dropped. Parker had heard everything about the cabin, about Caleb. They'd trusted him, and now he was running desperate. Dangerous, and armed with too much knowledge. Ethan's voice hardened. Carter, get Caleb out now. Parker's coming. The nearest vet was 30 miles away. It might as well have been a continent. In the back seat, Atlas lay limp, blood soaking into the seat. Caleb leaned against him, whispering things too soft to catch. Dr. Carter drove like hell. Ethan kept pressure. On the wounds, hands slick and shaking. Stay with us, he kept murmuring. Almost there. Hang on, buddy. But Atlas's breathing grew shallow, his eyes closed. This was the dog who faced armed criminals without blinking, who crossed mountains to find the lost, who heard the silent cries of caged children, and now he was fading quietly, inch by inch. Please, Caleb said, voice barely above a breath. Please don't leave me. I need you. His tiny hand stroked the shepherd's scarred ear. You're my hero. As if pulled from the edge by that single sentence, Atlas's eyes fluttered open. His tail shifted, just once brushing Caleb's leg like a goodbye. By the time they hit the clinic, Atlas was out cold. Major blood loss, probable shock. Save him, Ethan said hoarsely. "Whatever it takes. Out, both of you." Outside, in the tiny waiting area, Caleb collapsed into Ethan's side, all his courage spent. Fear and exhaustion took over the weight of it, finally too much. Made the call quietly, voice tight as he asked dispatch to send someone for Parker's body and to seal off the area. He held Caleb close while the boy cried himself into a fitful sleep, small shoulders shaking with grief until exhaustion finally overtook him. Surgery, still fighting to survive. "I've never seen a kid love a dog like that," the receptionist murmured, setting a lukewarm coffee in his hands. "Reminds me of my son Henry and our old Blue. That dog pulled him out of the creek back in '63. Henry never forgot it. Visited that dog's grave every Sunday till he passed." Ethan managed a nod, his throat too tight to answer. Atlas hadn't just saved Caleb, he'd saved all of them. And now he might not make it out. The first light of morning crept across the clinic floor, striping it with pale gold through half-open blinds. Ethan hadn't moved. Caleb was curled beside him, finally at peace in sleep, his face damp and flushed. Dr. Carter had left an hour earlier. Reluctantly, after Ethan insisted she give her full statement to the authorities. It had been 6 hours since Atlas was wheeled through those doors, 6 long hours of vague updates still in surgery, removing the bullet, stabilizing vitals. Each update a fragile thread Ethan held onto with every shred of hope he had left. The front door creaked open, and in stepped Sheriff Donovan. The man looked wrecked-older, grayer, rumpled uniform hanging off his tired frame. He asked softly. "Still fighting?" Ethan rasped. Knife missed his organs, but ... the blood loss. His voice failed. Donovan just nodded. "And the boy?" he asked, glancing at the sleeping child. Ethan looked down at Caleb, then shook his head slowly. "No injuries, but Atlas is his whole world." "If we lose him—" "Let's not go there yet, Donovan," interrupted gently. "Dogs like that, they're tougher than they look." "Parker's gone," Donovan finally said. Dr. Carter's statement holds clear self-defense. No charges. He leaned forward, voice harder now, and Chambers. "He's flipped, trying to cut a deal now that everything's crumbling." Donovan's face darkened. "Not that it'll help. After what we found at that lodge." He stopped short, casting a glance toward Caleb. "Let's just say none of them are walking free again." Ethan nodded, feeling numb. It was justice, sure, but it felt hollow. Parker had claimed Chambers wasn't the top that it went even. "Higher FBI's running with that now," Donovan continued. "There were arrests this morning, judges, business types, even a few in office." He rubbed his face, eyes red. "It was right under our noses. Mitchell—" Before Ethan could answer, the inner door opened. Dr. Monroe stepped out. Caleb stirred at her voice and opened his eyes, immediately focusing on the blood staining her shirt. "Where's Atlas?" he asked, panic rising. "Is he?" "He's alive," she said quickly, stable but still critical. Gently shifted the boy off his lap and rose. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of both of us." The vet glanced at them both, then nodded. "He suffered extensive trauma. The bullet shattered his scapula. We had to reconstruct part of the bone. The stab wounds were deep, but missed anything vital. The major issue was blood loss." Ethan stared at her, heart thudding. She hesitated. "He's holding steady after the transfusion, but there's nerve damage to his right front leg. The injury's severe." The weight of her words landed hard. A K-9 who couldn't chase, couldn't work. "You're saying he can't return to duty," Ethan said flatly. Dr. Monroe met his gaze. "He'll need long-term rehab. He might walk again, but not like before. His career as a working dog is probably over. But he survived, and to be honest, I didn't think he would." Caleb had been listening, his brow furrowed. "He'll be different now," he said softly. The quiet words cut through the room. Ethan knelt beside him. "What do you mean, Bud?" Caleb looked him straight in the eye. "The bad place changed me." The simplicity, the truth in that, made Ethan's throat tighten again. "That's exactly it," Dr. Monroe said, smiling. "Dogs don't dwell on what they've lost. They adapt. They find new ways to be okay." "Can we see him?" Caleb asked, voice small. Dr. Monroe nodded. "He's sedated and will stay. Here for several days, but a visit will do him good." She led them to a quiet recovery room where Atlas lay stretched on a padded table, wrapped in gauze and IVS. His dark fur looked dull under the overhead lights. Machines beeped steadily beside him. The strong, proud dog looked almost... The doctor fixed you. Then, even quieter, "I'm sorry you got hurt 'cause of me." "No," Ethan said firmly, hand on the boy's shoulder. It was his mission. Caleb didn't respond, but his touch grew softer, more certain. And then barely a twitch, Atlas's tail gave a slow thump against the table. Dr. Monroe smiled at the movement. "He knows you're here. That's a very good sign." They stayed for 15 quiet minutes, Caleb never once moving his hand from Atlas's side. Ethan soaking in every detail as the vet explained the care plan for the coming weeks. The prognosis was guarded, but hopeful. Atlas would live. He'd heal. He'd adapt, just not to the same life he'd known. As they prepared to leave, promising to return by afternoon, Caleb leaned in close and whispered near Atlas's ear, "You didn't give up on me. I'm not giving up on you. I'm not going anywhere." Outside, Sheriff Donovan was parked and ready to take them home. The morning mist had lifted, revealing a sky so sharp and blue it almost hurt to look at it. Ethan's eyelids ached from lack of sleep, but he knew he wouldn't rest anytime soon. His mind was spinning with questions, trying to piece together a puzzle that kept shifting. "I've arranged security at your house," Donovan said, as they pulled onto the main road. "Just a precaution, until we know exactly who's left in Chambers' circle." Ethan gave a tired nod. His home, once a tomb of sorrow, now carried a weight he didn't dare put at risk Caleb's safety. Atlas's fragile recovery. A second shot at something like hope. "Atlas has been placed on medical retirement," Donovan added, checking the rearview mirror. Caleb had nodded off again in the back seat. "Full benefits, long-term care, therapy, the works." "They can't just toss him aside," Ethan snapped, his voice rising with protective heat. "No one's tossing him," Donovan cut in, firm but not unkind. "That dog gave more than his share. He's earned this. And frankly, Ethan, maybe it's time you stopped running too." "What's that supposed to mean?" Donovan sighed, not letting go of the wheel. "It means ever since Sarah and Emma, you've been surviving, not living. Always first to take the toughest cases, the riskiest jobs. The only thing keeping you connected to the world has been that dog. It struck like a gut punch. Accurate, undeniable. My point is, that kid back there doesn't need someone just going through the motions. He needs you, present. So does Atlas. Maybe this is life giving the three of you a do-over." Ethan didn't answer. The words hung there, clinging to him as they pulled into his driveway. On the porch stood Martha Wilson, arms crossed, face etched with concern. As soon as Donovan stopped the car, she was down the steps in a flash. "Land's sakes, Ethan Mitchell," she exclaimed, yanking open the door. "Half the town's buzzing about what went down. Y'all all right?" Her eyes darted to the sleeping boy, then to the dried blood on Ethan's shirt. "And where's that dog of yours?" Inside, as Ethan carried Caleb to the guest room, he explained Atlas's condition in a hushed voice. Martha listened without interrupting, then gave a short, decisive nod. "Well, that settles it," she declared. "I'm staying." "What?" Ethan blinked. "That boy needs warm meals, and someone's got to keep an eye on him while you're at the clinic with Atlas. No arguments. I've already told Tommy to watch my place." Too drained to protest, Ethan nodded. Gratitude didn't even cover it. Martha, as it turned out, was a whirlwind in a flowered apron. Within a few hours, she had stew bubbling on the stove, clean sheets on every bed, and her knitting needles clicking like gunfire from the spare room. "My Henry always said idle hands were the devil's tools," she remarked, sliding yet another casserole into the oven. "Besides, Tommy's more work than this little angel." She nodded at Caleb, who sat at the table drawing quiet little pictures, every one of them featuring a dog. Over the next 3 days, they settled into a rhythm. Mornings at home with Caleb, afternoons with Atlas at the clinic, evenings spent at the kitchen table while Ethan updated them on Atlas's slow recovery. Dr. Monroe, cautiously hopeful, shared notes on his progress. "He's pushing himself hard," she said, watching the shepherd attempt to rise during therapy. "Dogs usually shut down after trauma like this, but he perks up every time he hears your name, or the kids." On the 4th afternoon, As Ethan sat beside Atlas's kennel, his phone buzzed. The caller ID read, "Agent Reeves. We've found." "Something," she said, skipping any greeting. "Something about Caleb, his mother." Ethan's posture snapped straight. He stepped outside to take the call in private. Alina Summers didn't just work for Chambers' law firm, Reeves explained. She was secretly building a case gathering intel on the whole operation. For months before she vanished, Ethan's heart thudded. "What are you saying?" She left something behind, something hidden, meant for Caleb to eventually find. "That doesn't make any sense. He was 5. Exactly, which is why we think she turned it into a game. A story. Something he'd remember." Reeves paused. "That symbol he's been drawing the circle with the eye. It wasn't from Parker's paperwork. It's a sign Alina made up. A clue, a way to point someone toward evidence if something happened to her." Ethan's mind reeled. He was 5. Reeves. And kids remember more than we think, especially when it's framed like a secret mission between them and their mom. "So you want to interrogate him?" "We want to talk to him," she replied gently. "See if he recalls anything, details, phrases, drawings." Ethan hesitated. Caleb had only just begun to smile again. "To feel safe. He's not just a witness," Ethan said, voice low. "He's a child, one who survived things most grown men couldn't." "This isn't just about Caleb," Reeves countered. "What his mother left behind could expose people way up the chain, people who'd kill to stay hidden. And they might still be watching him." The warning wasn't subtle. "I'll ask him," Ethan finally agreed, "but only when he's ready." As he hung up, he turned to see Dr. Monroe in the doorway. "Atlas is cleared to come home," she said softly. "He's stable enough for outpatient rehab. It'll be a long road, but he's ready." Ethan should have felt relief. Instead, dread settled in his gut. They were returning to a home filled with unknowns. Caleb's drawings might be more than trauma, they could be a map to secrets someone would kill to bury. Yet when he looked through the glass, Atlas was alert, eyes locked on him, broken, but present. Just like Ethan, just like Caleb. Somehow, together, they'd fight whatever was coming. 1 year later, the Miller Ranch was unrecognizable. The rotten barn was gone, the underground chamber sealed off in concrete. In its place, a quiet memorial garden, winding paths of native flowers, trees that offered gentle shade, and benches for reflection. At its center stood a statue, bronze, dignified. A German shepherd with one paw raised, ears forward as if listening. The inscription beneath read, "For those who hear, when others cannot listen." Ethan stood at the edge, hands in his pockets. Watching Caleb no longer small and fragile place, a bunch of daisies at the statue's feet, beside him walked Atlas. Still limping, still here, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan allowed himself to believe in the future. Night settled in around the trees, and the forest breathed in silence. Atlas's coat had grown back, thick and healthy, though that pale scar slicing through his fur, the one from the blade, remained like a ghost of the past. Sheriff Donovan stepped up beside Ethan, arms folded, gaze steady. "They make a good pair," he said quietly. At 61, Donovan had chosen to delay retirement after what happened with the Chambers case. He wanted to help rebuild the department with real accountability this time. "They've walked through hell," Ethan answered, watching Caleb kneel to adjust the custom harness supporting Atlas's damaged shoulder. That harness had become part of the dog's new life. The past year had reshaped them all. For Atlas, it meant painful rehab, water therapy, balance work, a daily battle with the body that no longer moved like it used to. The once proud K9, the officer had spiraled into frustration, unable to complete even basic tasks. It was Caleb who anchored him, who understood his grief in ways no adult could. Maybe because he too had to rebuild a life that didn't look the same anymore. "Still you," Caleb had whispered once, voice trembling, crouched beside Atlas. During a hard session where the shepherd refused to even try. "The people who love you don't care about that." For Caleb, the year had been no easier. There were nightmares he couldn't explain, sessions with the therapist that left him drained, days when it felt like healing took 1 step forward and 2 steps back. But there were also soccer practices, lunchboxes, new friends who didn't ask too many questions. Slowly, carefully, his childhood began to take shape, again like a painting, restored one careful stroke at a time. The federal investigation into Chambers' network had blown open doors no one dared to knock on before. 2 judges, a state senator, and several top-tier businessmen had all been charged. But the break came from Elena Summers specifically, the files she'd hidden in a safety deposit box that needed a secret code. She had disguised it as a fairy tale for her little boy, wrapped it in magic to keep it safe. Mama said if something bad happened, I should find the eye and tell it our numbers, Caleb explained when he finally pieced it together. I forgot until I saw it in the quiet man's folder. Elena's body had been uncovered weeks later. Buried deep in the Appalachian foothills, her death wasn't a mystery anymore, just a tragedy with coordinates. Caleb had stood still beside the white casket, Atlas pressed against his hip, Ethan's hand on his small shoulder. He didn't speak much after the service, retreating into that quiet, only children who've seen too much know how to carry. Days passed before he looked up and whispered to Ethan, "She was trying to help people, the way Atlas helped me." Ethan had no words, only the weight of knowing it was true. His own journey had twisted in ways he hadn't planned. 6 months back, the adoption went through what started as temporary became something permanent. The kid who had arrived with a hospital-issued duffel now had a room cluttered with books, cleats, and dirty socks, and Ethan. He'd stepped down. From patrol, transferring to the family crimes unit, no more door-busting raids, just steady work that let him be home when Caleb's school bus pulled up. It gave his skills purpose without sacrificing his peace. And Atlas, the retired K-9, was no longer tracking suspects. Now, with Dr. Carter's help, he served as a therapy dog in her clinic, comforting children trying to find their way out of nightmares. "The ceremony's about to begin," Donovan said, nodding toward the garden. The 1-year mark of the rescue had drawn a surprising crowd. Families of the other kids, police from different jurisdictions, neighbors who had volunteered time and money to build the memorial. Sophie, Max, and Lily had all flown in with their parents. The kids stuck close together, bonded by something deeper than words. When Caleb saw them, his face lit up, and Atlas was instantly welcomed into their circle as they traded stories about school, cartoons, and favorite snacks. Then Dr. Carter stepped forward, composed as ever, but her eyes shimmering with feeling. "A year ago today," she began, "we witnessed both the cruelty and the courage humans are capable of. This site held terrible secrets, but also revealed unshakable love and bravery." Her voice cracked just slightly. The children placed smooth stones into a shallow, reflecting pool, each one a symbol of a burden they no longer had to carry alone. Leaders spoke after about new laws, better training for officers, stronger systems for kids at risk. It's words, but good ones, promises that felt like they might actually hold. When it ended, Ethan found himself facing Martha Wilson. At 79, she was still a force, always dropping off casseroles, always speaking her mind. "Nice service," she said, tipping her sun hat. "Though someone should have mentioned that mutt of yours has more sense than half the boys in uniform." Ethan grinned. "Atlas doesn't need a trophy. He knows his worth." Martha's sharp gaze followed Caleb through the grass. "He called me Grandma Martha last week. Came by 4 cookies. I almost dropped my mixing bowl." The comment landed soft but deep. Caleb had been so guarded, slow to trust anyone beyond their little trio. For him to say that claim her, even just with words, meant more than he realized. The crowd began to scatter. Goodbyes called across the lawn. Caleb jogged back to Ethan, breathless, Atlas right behind, his pace uneven but determined. "Can we go home now?" he asked. Such a simple thing, but layered with everything they'd earned over the last 12 months. Home, a word that once meant nothing, now meant everything. "Yeah, buddy," Ethan replied. "I was thinking burgers tonight. The ones with cheese stuffed inside, just like Atlas likes." Caleb beamed. "You mean the only kind worth eating?" They walked toward the truck, the 3 of them side by side. Caleb steadied Atlas as they crossed a dip in the path, the boy's hand familiar and confident. The night stretched before them. Burgers, homework, maybe a movie. Nothing special by the world's measure, but to them, everything. The truck. Caleb stopped for a beat, eyes drifting back toward the garden bathed in amber light. "Atlas, he knew I needed a dad, right?" he asked, the words catching somewhere between doubt and hope. Ethan took a breath, giving the question the weight it deserved. "I think he knew we both needed someone to call home." Caleb gave a small nod, his shoulders easing. And now we got that. Atlas looked up at the two of them, his gaze sharp and tender all at once, tail brushing slowly against the dirt. In Ethan's mind, it all came back: the barn, the stench of rot, the barking that had refused to quit until truth clawed its way into daylight. Had Atlas always known what they'd mean to each other? "Let's go, buddy," Ethan said, lifting the shepherd gently onto the ramp that led to the truck bed. Time to head home. They pulled away from the Miller place, the flowers and stones of the memorial fading behind them. Ethan gripped the wheel, a quiet weight settling in his chest, not of sorrow, but something fuller. The barn where secrets had once festered now bloomed with remembrance. The dog who had tracked pain like scent now rode toward peace, and the boy the world once passed over, he had a name now, a place, and people who truly saw him. Atlas curled into the wind, ears twitching at every sound, eyes scanning. Caleb leaned lightly into Ethan, a quiet lean that spoke volumes. No words needed. They rode on under that big Georgia sky, leaving the cold of old shadows in the dust. Folks, let me tell y'all something from the heart. There are heroes walking among us quiet ones, the kind who don't ask for medals. Like Atlas, that shepherd who heard what no one else dared to hear, who faced down darkness with nothing but his instincts and loyalty. There was a time not so long ago when neighbors knew each other's names. When, if your kid didn't come home by sundown, half the block was out with flashlights. This story, it ain't just about a badge-wearing dog or a kid rescued from silence. It's about what we still have in us. It's about the kind of love that finds you when you ain't even looking. Like Ethan, stumbling into fatherhood with nothing but hope in his hands, or like Martha Wilson, showing up doing right, no matter what. Healing it don't come easy. It's in the small things, the first time a child laughs again, the way a broken animal starts to trust, the way a town stitches itself back together after everything falls apart. The world spins fast now, but some things never change. Darkness grows loud when good folks go quiet. Kids need warriors in their corner, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is listen to the whispers, the cries, the truths buried deep until someone like Atlas leads us there.